period. We've watched every other state in the nation where they're going through a period where their emergency response system is overwhelmed because of this community spread. It's facing us. We have over 300 cases here in Pinellas County, and we know that if we don't stay at home and help prevent that spread, it'll get far worse. So we're asking people to go through this time period, adhere to the governor's order, and help us in trying to put this behind us.
Okay, we're ready for questions. Why don't you give us the first one?
Sure. So boaters are still allowed to be on the water as long as they stay 50 feet away from other boats. But why are 10 people allowed on one boat? That seems excessive.
Well, that's the guidance that's been issued by CDC about groups of 10. So the order that was issued by state government was tracking the CDC order. So it's based upon the Centers for Disease Control and the experts saying that that is the number, and that's why they used it in the executive order.
Mm-hmm.
Which county parks are still open?
All the county parks are still open. We're asking people to practice social distancing guidelines. So stay in your small group. Don't have large group gatherings. We certainly have canceled all of the shelter activities in terms of large gatherings. And then where we have beaches, the beaches themselves are closed, but the parks are open.
And speaking of the beaches, when are they going to reopen?
We don't know at this time. They're closed, and they'll be closed as long as the commissioners continue to expand the executive order, the emergency order.
I'm a construction worker. Is what I do considered essential, or I'm having construction done on my house? Do I need to stop that?
You don't need to stop that. Construction is an essential activity. I'm sorry, an essential service. And if you look at the governor's order, which is somewhat difficult to read, is that all the construction activity is outlined in the attachment from the Department of Homeland Security. So construction work is an essential service, and people can continue to engage in the construction trade. Now, one of the things to keep in mind for everybody that's engaging in essential services or activities, you're still required to stay 6 feet apart and no more than groups of 10. So just because you can do it doesn't mean you can do it however you want. If you can do it, you still have to do it within that framework and within those guidelines. So what's important is that as people are on construction sites or engaged in it, they need to be 6 feet apart from their coworkers.
What is the difference between an essential and non-essential business?
Well, there's a whole list of items that are included in the governor's order. So he refers to two areas. One, and for essential businesses, he refers to the Department of Homeland Security, which outlines those types of activities. And then for services, he refers to a Miami-Dade order that was issued. Both of those are referenced within the order, and we have tried to boil those down into a one list, and we have that on our website. You can certainly go to our website and find it.
And we'll be updating that periodically. We hope to get an updated guidance for the community out sometime later today, if not first thing tomorrow. So we encourage everybody to continue to look at that guidance that we put out so that you're up to date. And as we get questions, we will continue. It's a fluid process. We'll continue to make decisions and inform everybody so they know what the rules are.
But I will add one piece to this. We keep going to an essential and non-essential, and like the sheriff said earlier, it's a pretty broad list. But remember, it goes back to whether you should not be going somewhere to do anything that's not essential, right? It's not a question of social distancing. It's to limit your activities and stay at home.
And can you just provide a little more clarification on who decides what is essential? Like what some of those lists are based on?
Well, as the administrator said, is that there was a guidance, if you will, put out by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and it had to do with the essential workforce in the United States. And then the mayor in Miami-Dade County, Mayor Jimenez, in his orders specifically outlined those things that were essential. So in all of the rules, nobody is saying specifically what is not essential. What they say is, here is what is essential and everything else is non-essential. So what we have had to do, so that we understand it and so that the public understands it, is to come up with a yes and a no list. So an example, and this is one we're getting a lot of questions about, but when you look at the Miami-Dade orders and you look at the Department of Homeland Security document, nowhere in there does it say that it is an essential service or an essential activity to wash your car. So car washes, if you go to look at the list, you're not going to find anywhere in those lists that car washes have to be closed. But because they are not listed as being essential, then they are closed. Another one would be florists, as an example of that. Shoe stores, clothing stores. So there's nothing you're going to be able to look at and see that, yes, this must be closed because it is non-essential. It only lists that which is essential, and everything else you can't leave your home for, and under the county order is closed.
Or as a worker, you can't go to provide that.
Correct. So, and that's important, and as the administrator said, that's very important for people to understand, is that it's twofold. Is that you can't leave your home to engage in it as an employee, and you can't leave your home to engage in it as a customer or a patron. So it's twofold. So people can't leave their home to go to the shoe store to sell shoes. You can't leave your home to go to the shoe store as a customer.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, if you see a business that you think is non-compliant, or you see just a group of more than 10 people anywhere, is that something that should be reported, and how would they go about reporting that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've set up a tip center, a call center. It's been in operation now for the last 10 days or so. And the number is 727-582-TIPS. There's also an email address that's available where people can submit those tips. And the email address is COVID tips-questions. So it's COVID tips, all one word, -questions at pcsonet.com. So that anybody that has a question about whether they can or cannot do something, or about whether somebody else and what they're seeing them do is permissible, or if you see something that you know is a violation, either call that number or send an email to that email address. And we have deputies throughout the county and teams that are out there that will respond, and you can call and ask your question, and they will answer the question in the call center that we have set up. We're getting a lot of calls. Over the last few days, they've been averaging about 300 calls a day. But we welcome the public to call and make sure that they know what the rules are. And if you see somebody that's not following the rules, tell us, because we want to make sure that we are fair and consistent across the board.
So is it all right for recreational purposes to ride your motorcycle or go for a drive in your car?
Yes, is the answer to that. You can engage in recreational activities.
How is it that a liquor store is essential but a smoke shop is not?
It was listed out specifically within the order, and so we're trying to interpret these, the same way, anybody else is, and so it's specifically called out for liquor sales within the order.
So it's one of the things that y'all need to understand is that the Board of County Commissioners, the county administrator, me, anybody else, other than the governor, didn't establish these lists. So these lists that we're all working under now were in the governor's executive order, and at the state government level is where they established what is essential. And we don't have any say in it. So we, like you, have to adhere to it.
This is specifically for the sheriff. Did voters do better or improve over the weekend compared to last weekend when it comes to the 50-foot rule?
They did, and we're very, very, very thankful to the voting community. Is that Sunday, the weather wasn't very good, so that wasn't really a good read. It was pretty sparse out there on Sunday, but Saturday, the weather was great, and we saw a huge improvement. Is everything from Three Rooker to Shell Key to the Intercoastal Waterway, the Barrier Islands. Now it was full, and there were a lot of people out there, but we really thank the voting public for doing a better job, and there was better distancing, and we are seeing better compliance. So we hope it'll be nice next weekend, and people will be out there, and we'll see that same improvement. and let everybody have fun, just follow the rules.
So there is no percentage of business defined as as an essential item. So you can have 1% of inventory essential products to stay open?
Well, here's again, I'll go back to what I said when I opened, is that don't play games. Do the right thing. We had one business as an example that was in the retail jewelry business. And that's what they really did. And they went out last week, and about 5 days ago now, and they got a pawn license. And they said, well, no, I'm a pawn shop, which is loans, which is financial services, which is permitted. And I can tell you that we're not going to play that game, and people are on the fly. We've had a number of businesses over the weekend that went to Sam's Club or someplace and bought boxes of Doritos and Slim Jims, and they're putting them on a counter and say, oh no, now I'm a convenience store. Well, that doesn't work. So if you were legitimately engaged in, I'll call it a multifaceted business before, and you're engaged in that multifaceted business now and you're trying to do the right thing, we'll work with you. We had one business, and sometimes the easiest way to answer these questions, or the best way, is with an example. We had one business that was engaged in bike servicing and sales, and also renting kayaks. Well, one of the things that's specifically listed in the orders as essential is bike sales and servicing, but kayak rentals is not. So we work with that business, and they just stopped doing the kayak rentals, and they are solely engaged in the bike service and sales, and we were able to work that out. So, there is no percentages in the rules. It's about common sense. And again, just don't push the envelope. Just try and do the right thing. Because again, remember what this comes back to? This is serious stuff, and people are losing their lives. And we have not seen the peak of this. So why would people do that? Why would they go out and play games? Why would they go to the store and buy a pack of Slim Jims and some soda and put it on the counter? So that I get it, because they're hurting and because they want to try and stay in business and they got to provide for their families. I get all that. But these rules are in place because we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime, and hopefully never will again. But at the end of the day, unless we curtail the activity and we keep people apart, we're not going to be able to put this behind us, and we're going to see more people get sick, and unfortunately more people die. And that's what everybody's trying to avoid.
Will any agencies in the county, will officers or deputies be routinely pulling people over to see why they're out and about?
No, we don't do that. Never have. We don't do that in the United States of America. We don't ask people for their papers. Is that we're looking at the individual businesses, and we're looking for compliance. But that won't happen.
Is there currently or any talk of a curfew in Pinellas County?
Gary, you want to?
No. We have not talked about a curfew. We're trying to get people to do the right thing and stay at home. We're coming up to this period where we know that if we can, flatten the curve, get people to not go out in large groups, that we can, try to address that through simple means. And so, no, we have not discussed a curfew. I know other places have.
Is kayaking considered recreational?
Yes. Now, be clear with that. If you got a kayak, yes. But engaging in the kayak rental business, no. But you can, if you got one, sure. You want to borrow one from a neighbor, you can launch it and enjoy it all day long. But operating a business for the renting of kayaks, that would be not essential.
Am I allowed to have people over at my house? What if they're all family members?
Go back to, you need to do the right thing, is that what it says is you can leave your house to assist family members or friends. If people want to have a big party and everybody's out there and you're inviting people over that they may be family members, but you only see them once or twice a year, and you got 30 people at your house, and you're having a big outdoor barbecue and everybody's drinking beer, and it's just like any old weekend, that's not right. And no, you can't do that. And again, it goes back to is that you're not helping to resolve the situation. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, and that could very much be part of the problem and continue to exacerbate the situation that we're in.
Can we travel freely between states?
Yes.
Does this affect any movement on the bridges?
No.
How long will this be the new normal?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, you know, our professionals tell us that we're several weeks away from the peak. Now, how long does that stay afterwards? How do we reopen the economy? How do we say that we should, you know, you can start going out, or you can open up certain types of businesses? You know, that's a question everybody's asking. I think we're seeing those same types of questions being, asked in other states. So that's something that we're looking at. We're going to try to learn from others' experience on how to responsibly address that.
If a manufacturing company has been shut down due to being non-essential and they're interested in transitioning their production facility to produce PPE or masks related items, how would they go about doing that?
So I'm not sure that exactly understand the question. I mean, if somebody was engaged in manufacturing or production of essential items, like PPE, masks, etc., they can do that.
The question is if they were not producing that and
Right.
want to transition to produce an
They can do
essential
that.
item.
They can do that, and we've had a number, I do want to say, because we've had a number of local manufacturing that have stepped up to do that for us. They're looking at face shields and different pieces. One person can make, you know, the band, the other one can make the shield, and they're working to where we can produce some of our own PPE locally. So I can't thank the companies enough for stepping forward and trying to help our first responders, our medical personnel, in trying to be safe as they do their job. So we're seeing that over and over again in many different areas.
Yeah, I guess, you know, and one of the things with these questions is for people to understand is we're not out there, we're not looking, and in fact here in Pinellas County, I think that prior to the governor's order, we definitely took the approach, we're trying to keep businesses open. We are not looking to shut businesses down. What we are looking to do is just making sure people are complying with the four corners of the order. And if somebody can transition into being able to provide what is necessary and essential and keep some people working and keep your businesses open, we're all about that and would support that. It just has to be for what is permissible.
Well, we also are asking, though, is for those businesses that are essential, that they implement to the maximum extent possible social distancing practices. Because it doesn't matter, you know, if we're trying to slow the spread and you pack people into, you know, a one large room in close proximity to one another, that contributes to the problem whether you're providing an essential service or not.
Well, and a great example of that is that they can't operate are the call centers. You know, or any business where you've got a lot of people, as the administrator said, is you got a lot of people in one room, whether it's 20, 30, or 100 or 300, is they have to be 6 feet apart, and they have to be no more than groups of 10. And I suggest in that environment, everybody just needs to be 6 feet apart.
How are you enforcing non-essential businesses being open?
So when we receive that information through the tip center, or as the law enforcement officers around the county see them, we're going into the businesses, having a discussion with the manager or the owner that they need to shut down and asking them to do so. Majority of the time, we're getting that compliance and they are agreeing to close. If they don't, then a supervisor comes by and has a discussion with them. Over the weekend, I had to go out to a couple myself and have a discussion with them to enlighten them on what the requirements were. And sometimes, you know, the conversation has to get a little tougher, and we have to give them the alternatives if they don't. But that's few and far between. Most people, once we ask them to do it, are compliant. But ultimately, what people should know is that we have options, and one of the options is that under the county's order, the administrator has the authority to issue an order that would shut the business down. We could try that. We could also, don't want to, we could also criminally charge somebody, and that would either be through a notice to appear, which is like a citation, or we could physically arrest somebody and take them to the county jail. And you know, all those options are available. We don't want to get there, so we just ask people again, just do what's asked of you and do the right thing, and we don't have to have that discussion.
Can I use the tip line if I live in a municipality with our own police department?
Yes, and we're working with the municipalities, and it's probably the easiest thing is to use the tip line, and that way we're tracking everything. But yes, absolutely, anybody within Pinellas County, anywhere in Pinellas County can use the tip line.
I noticed some folks laying out on the sand on the Dunedin Causeway. Is that okay?
Well, the beaches are closed, you know, and so to the extent possible, we're enforcing the beaches being closed. Obviously, when you see one person out or, you know, two people walking or something like that, is that where you're going to put your enforcement effort? Not necessarily, but the beaches are closed, and so no, they cannot be doing that.
Has there been any changes to the processing of child custody orders, or are children being kind of held where they are, staying put?
No, you know, as far as the child custody orders, meaning, I think what the question is that like in a divorce setting where a judge is given shared parenting responsibilities and the kids are going back and forth, and whether the kids should stay with one parent as opposed to going back and forth with the other parent, etc. That is not something that we get involved with. That's really between you and the family law judge. But I have not heard anything to that effect, and that's something really between the courts and the parents, but I have not heard anything to that. That is not something we would get involved with.
How is the jail population? Is it still overcrowded?
No, it's actually much better. And from where we were, and if you look back about a year ago this time, we're actually down by probably about 1,100 inmates. And from where we started this now going about a month ago, we started with over 3,000 inmates, and we're right now down to about 2,100 in the jail. We had about 220 on the floor, and you know that's been cleared out. So we're actually booking many fewer people than we were. We used to book about 130 a day, and now we're booking about 30 a day. So the jail population is exponentially lower than it was, thanks to the work of the courts, the criminal defense lawyers, and the state attorney working to dispose of cases through the normal process. We did not do a jail sweep. I want to be clear about that. This is not a situation where we just went in and one fell swoop just released a bunch of people who some might say, and probably correctly, shouldn't get out of jail. This was all done through the normal processes. And a lot of hard work by the judges and the lawyers on both sides, the criminal defense lawyers and the state attorney, and we appreciate their work to do that because it's put the jail in a very manageable situation, and we're working hard to make sure that the virus doesn't get in the jail. We've got screening processes in place, and the lower the population, the easier it is to do all of that.
What would you say to people who accuse those using the tip line for being snitches?
Well, people are calling in because they see violations. You know, that's not, you know, you can call what you want, but we need help, as we always do, you know.
And also, a lot of people don't know. I mean, think about this. This come down very quickly. You know, a week ago, it was a whole different ballgame. And so now with these orders, trying to get that information out, you know, that's the reason the education's so important. The reason the sheriff's office has delivered notices to every condo owner about the pools, to every church and synagogue about social distancing practices, and all the efforts that they've done is try to educate people about these new orders because they're coming and they're changing in real time. And so this week's been a big change for the way we operate.
How are local hospitals holding up?
Local hospitals are holding up with the current number of cases that we have. We're working with them in terms of their PPE, all their protective equipment, to make sure that they have enough. I know that they're exhausting all of their channels, but obviously that's a nationwide problem. So we're fine now. The question is in 2 weeks from now, when we see peaks in the number of people impacted by this, of whether or not they'll be able to hold that and sustain that. And so that is a concern.
Are law offices considered essential?
Well, the answer is yes, but, and what it specifically says in the order is that law offices are essential as long as what is going on is to meet court-imposed deadlines. So all I can tell you is that that's what it says, which a fair reading of that means that it's not business as usual. And so if somebody's going into a law office simply to get business transaction advice, as an example, that would not be permissible, and that would be an impermissible operating of that law office or business. So they can operate to the extent necessary to meet court-imposed deadlines. That's what the order says.
Why are they letting more than 10 people at once into Walmart or other large retail stores?
Well, that is an essential service or business that is identified. However, they most have implemented social distancing practices. So, I saw recently some of them are changing their corporate policies to where, you're going one way down an aisle. They're having 6-foot separation. They're limiting the number of people that goes into the store. So inside of a week, we've seen a complete shift in terms of the types of practices that they're implementing. Before, they were just having people stay 6 feet apart outside the store, but and in the or in the checkout aisle, but not necessarily down the aisles. So you've seen a lot of best practices be implemented, I think, over a very short period of time, trying to be responsive to this concern. And so I think they're doing what they can. What we need is every store to adopt those same practices.
One of the things that seems to be a confusion point too, I think this is a good opportunity to bring this up at this juncture, is that there is nothing in any of the guidelines or the orders that prevents more than 10 people from being under one roof. And I think that's where some people are getting confused, because they think like a Publix, like a Walmart, like a Lowe's, a Home Depot, or wherever it is, when it said no more than groups of 10 and the groups have to be 6 feet apart. So if you take a mom and a dad and their 2 kids and they're in Publix, nobody's ever saying or suggesting that the mom and the dad and the 2 kids have to be all 6 feet apart. That doesn't make any sense. So what it does say is that if you take that mom and dad and 2 kids and they're standing in the checkout line, and then you've got another family of 5, the 2 families of 5 need to be 6 feet apart. Then if you had an individual who is by himself or herself in that same line, then that individual needs to be 6 feet apart from those families. So as long as people are one family unit, living in the same residence, etc., and loosely defined as to what that is they're living together, then it doesn't make any difference whether they're sitting next to each other in their home or in the checkout line. So again, we're applying this and we're enforcing it with that common sense. But I do think that is a big confusion point for people when they talk about groups of 10. That they're thinking that means that you can't have more than 10 people under one roof. And that also applies to churches. Nothing says you can't have 100 people in a church. You can, but again, they either need to be, if they're all individuals in that church, then they all need to be 6 feet apart. If 5 of them are a family, then they need to be 6 feet apart from the next family or the next individual.
Have there been any changes to the way deputies are responding to calls? Should we be concerned that looting may become a problem?
Well, we're aware of that, and I am concerned. We're providing a lot of extra patrols, especially during the daytime hours for these closed businesses. So the business owners should know that we have extra deputies on the street, and they've been given instruction to conduct extra patrols so that we don't have daytime burglaries and people that are vandalizing property or doing something they shouldn't do. So we're very aware of that, and we're also paying extra attention to the alarm calls during the day that we receive. So a heightened awareness on our part about these closed businesses. So that's important. As far as responding to calls, people will see a difference in the calls and how we respond to them. When appropriate, there's a list of calls the deputies won't be physically responding to. They'll be calling you by phone to take a report. So let's say, as an example, is that somebody broke into your car and they stole the change out of the car, and it happened sometime within the last week, as an example. Ordinarily, we go out, we meet with you, and we take the report. We're not going to do that because it's not necessary to meet in person under these circumstances, so the deputy will call you on the phone. We'll still take the report, and we'll still investigate it, and it'll be sent to the detectives for follow-up. But we're going to try as best we can to limit the physical contact between the deputies and the public where it's appropriate.
Since liquor stores are considered essential, can a bar sell bottles of liquor?
So a restaurant, okay, is that, and the specific question, and I'm not sure, Barry, you can answer if you do, I don't recall. I know that restaurants can sell liquor and can sell beer and they can sell wine. But the question is, a bar, and can they just sell like bottles of liquor? I don't believe they can, but that's a question that you would need to ask of the Department of Business and Professional Regulation in their Alcohol and Beverage Division. But I don't believe so unless you know
Yeah,
otherwise.
no, I would concur with that. I don't believe that's allowed.
No.
I have heard about restaurants as part of their takeout
Right.
offering people a glass of wine or something like that, but I don't believe their liquor license allows that.
No.
How are deputies protecting themselves on the street and in the jail?
So we've got a fair amount. Thankfully, right now we're okay for it. As everybody's learned this phrase of PPE or personal protective equipment, of the appropriate masks. They're called N95 masks and gloves, gowns where it's applicable. So we're okay right now. But if we were to hit a surge or a peak and it affected law enforcement more, then we could have a void. But for right now, we're hopeful that we won't, and we're in good shape. But all the deputies have been issued, again, all that sanitation equipment, and they have what they need to ensure their safety and health.
Why are some sandbars closed even though boaters are following the 50-foot rule?
Well, the state, first of all, a lot of those sandbars are under state control. So Three River Island is an example of that. Shell Key is under county control. So the county, as an example, has closed all beaches. Shell Key is under county control, so that beach area has been closed. So even those spoil islands and the sandbars, as the question referred to them as, are under state control. And so they have specifically closed those. Now the state did not close beaches, but the state has closed parks, and they've closed those areas that are under their control. That's why they're closed.
How many test kits have we gotten for Pinellas, and how often do they come in?
Yeah, you know how many test kits? So the Department of Health manages that, and so it's both through the Department of Health and through Baycare. So Baycare set up a site. The Department of Health also has testing protocols, and so they go through those. So from that standpoint, I don't know exact number of tests off the top of my head.
Yeah, there's a lot, and one of the things there's a lot of Department of Health testing, and you have private hospital testing. You also have private labs testing.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's almost an impossible answer at this point. Is that we have a conference call every morning with the executive policy group here in Pinellas County, and the director of the health department is on the call, and we do talk about testing. And they try and keep tabs on the number, but I think even that exact number is a little bit elusive for them because of the amount of private testing that's being done.
Right.
Can beachfront homeowners or property owners go to the beach in front of their property?
So the answer to that is yes, because the order affects that property which is publicly accessible. So if you have a private home and you have a private home on the beach and that sand in front of your home, you own it, then yes, you can go on it.
Are private boat marinas allowed to be open under the governor's order?
Yes. Same way. We have not. So the governor's order did not close boat ramps and marinas. So and ours, we did not implement a closure of our public boat ramps. Again, we're asking people to practice social distancing, spread out, and then once they get out on the water, be responsible.
Are real estate agents considered an essential business, and if so, are they able to show houses?
Yes. To both.
If the sandbar is underwater, is that still considered part of the closed area? Spoil islands like beaches are only closed up to the water line, I thought.
Well, I guess if you want to go diving, you can go diving. If the sandbar is underwater, is that the question? Well, if it's underwater, common sense, and look, the reality of it is, and we saw this last weekend, we saw it this weekend. So, technically, Three River Island, which is a sandbar, if you will, pretty large one, that's in the Gulf off the North Pinellas coast. Technically, it's closed, and there were people out there last weekend. As we said, it wasn't good. This weekend on Saturday, there were people out there. It was better, and they were distanced, and they were doing the right thing. So, as we keep saying, that what we are concerned about is those big groups, those where there is an opportunity for the disease to be spread, And if you have a mom and a dad and their 2 kids and they got a couple shovels and a bucket and they're making sand castles on the sand at 3 Rooker, we got better things to worry about than that. Okay? Now you got 40 people and they're on the sand at 3 Rooker, and they got kegs of beer and coolers of beer and they're partying and they're doing all that, and then we got a problem. So we're trying to apply this with a dose of reality and common sense, and understanding that these are tough times, and people also have to have some sort of a recreational release.
Are evictions still taking place in Pinellas County?
No, they're not. There was an order issued that suspended evictions for 45 days. Now, one of the things that's important for people to know on that is that I, as the sheriff, have no control over that. Once the judge issues what's called a writ of possession, and it commands us to serve it, we have to serve it. Up until the time that the governor issued the executive order, which was only a couple of days ago, is that some of the judges in Pinellas County, some were staying the orders, which means that they told us don't serve them. Other judges, when there were requests of the court to stay it, they denied those requests and they said serve them anyway. So that's an issue for the courts. That's an issue for the judiciary. And all we do is do what they say as far as the orders are concerned. But the governor superseded all of that and issued an order last week. We're still waiting for a little bit of an interpretation on that, but for right now, because the governor issued that order, is we're not serving any of those writs of possession.
If we know someone is infected, do we need to report it?
Well, I don't know really the answer to that is that if somebody has it, I guess how would you know they have it?
Yeah.
This is something you got to be very careful about. And I can tell you the other thing that we're seeing too is that on calls that the deputies and law enforcement are responding to, there's people running around out there that are using this disease, if you will, and this virus as kind of as a sword. And they'll say, I'm positive, I've got COVID-19, I've got coronavirus, and I'm going to breathe on you, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just silliness that people are doing. So I don't know how you would know, but if somebody had a positive test, then the health department would know about that, and they are addressing the appropriate quarantine requirements. Now, if somebody does have coronavirus, they do have COVID-19, and they're not following the quarantine directions by the Department of Health, the Department of Health, not me and not the county administrator, but the Department of Health and the state surgeon general has authority to order somebody quarantined. So if somebody has true concerns, that is somebody that has been determined to be positive, not something they've heard or something that somebody has just spewed or speculated about, and they're not following the orders of the Department of Health, then I would suggest that they could contact the Department of Health and report that to them. But they need to be very careful about that, and before they start making those phone calls, and making sure that they know for sure that the person that has tested positive and are under the auspices of the Department of Health.
So is the plan to reopen the beaches in May, or is that dependent upon any further action by the Board of County Commissioners?
It really depends upon the situation. I mean, we closed the beaches for a reason because of the large congregations of people. We reopen them, we're going to have that same thing occur, and as a result, then that would cause the spread to occur. So we're going to do it based upon the conditions on the ground and how this whole situation plays out.
Are we still allowed to go walking on pathways for exercise and let kids run around in open, grassy public areas?
Absolutely. I mean, it talks about permitted activities and recreation and getting out of the house, and just again to implement social distancing practices as you do it.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. We certainly appreciate everybody joining us today. The county administrator and I will do this again on Thursday night at 6 p.m. So if you have additional questions, please join us again on Thursday at 6 p.m. If you know anybody that has questions and weren't able to join us here this morning, let them know about it. We'll push it out again over the various social media platforms, and we'll talk to you all again on Thursday at 6. Thanks for joining us.